There's 4 tissue types. We're going to take a look at epithelial today, including their location and function, and then reiterate the principle of complementarity. Complementarity. So definitions of tissues is that they are a group of cells that are similar in structure and perform a common or related function. Okay, so that's how we can categorize tissues. From here, there's 4 different types. Today we're talking about epithelial, but we also will talk about connective, muscle, and nervous tissues. Here we go. So the nervous tissue is the brain matter. It's also the spinal cord and brain stem, right? So brain stem, spinal cord that runs down, and then its associated peripheral nerves are made of nervous tissue. Muscle tissue is skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Epithelial tissues are the ones that form boundaries between environments. So they do things like they protect the whole system, right? They do secrete different substances, absorb as well. That would be like in your intestine, and they work to filter. So today we'll be looking in depth at epithelial tissues. Connective tissues support the entire body. They protect the body, and they help different types of tissues stay together. So here's a microscopic view of what epithelial tissues. This is a stain slide. This is computography. So this is a computer image, and this is when you look under the microscope what you see. But epithelial, they're usually a sheet of cells, and again, they cover body surface or cavities. So most of them are doing the covering and the lining. They can be external and internal surfaces. So the skin is a great example of an epithelial tissue. There's also glandular ones, which are the tissues and glands that secrete, such as saliva. So let's look at the lining here. So this blue lining would be an epithelial tissue, okay? So it's the lining of a cavity, right? Which is a little bit different than when you were thinking about the skin, right? Which is kind of on the outside, lining the whole system. But here we can see the epithelial tissues will be lining cavities as well. Just another image of how they line the outside and inside of cavities. Okay. This is cardiac muscle, right? So this is a different type of tissue, but then you have the epithelial surrounding it. So what characteristics exist? Polarity, and that's just having 2 opposite poles, like the north pole of the earth and the south pole of the earth. There's a basal and apical side. They're supported by connective tissue, so they're tacked down somehow, and that's with connective tissue. There's no blood supply, that's avascular, without vascularization or without blood supply. And they do regenerate, so cells undergo mitosis, they migrate and move, and then they slough off and die. So in order to regenerate, there has to be a process of exiting as well. Otherwise, you would have like cancer, right? When something regenerates without something dying off, you would get a tumor because you'd have more cells than can fit in a space. So polarity, here it is written out by definition, the top and the bottom of something. Apical surface is the upper free side. It's also exposed to the end of the cavity. So when we had that blue image going, the apical surface was going to be in the inside of that body. I'm just going to pop up there, right? So I'll go blue because that's what I just said. So the apical surface, my arrow is pointing at the apical surface. Now if I come around, here, let me go down here. This would be the basal. So in the esophagus, the apical surface is open to the cavity, and the basal surface is connected to the connective tissue. Okay. It's called a basal lamina, and here it is in microscopic form. So here's the tissue. This is the apical surface exposed, and then the basal surface is tacked down. Here we just have it saying that it borders an open space, and then here we have it saying it's next to, this is connective tissue. I must just think that this does a good job of showing the connective tissue clearly. So let me show you that again. Um, Apical surface, there's the open space or the free space. Here is a microvilli, right? So when something's floating past here, these hair-like projections can grab them, right? It's going through a passageway, and these can grab out nutrients and what have you. Um, and then you come down, here's the cell body, and it's adhered down here. You can see beautifully the connective tissue area where the basal surface is connected. Blink slide. Avascular but innervated. Hang on. These are characteristics, no blood vessels. That's just the definition of avascular. So if something's avascular, it still needs to get nutrition. So how do they do it? By diffusion, which means that high concentration to low concentration. So it diffuses across a membrane, and that's how it happens. So the connective tissue underneath will diffuse the nutrients that the cells need in that way. The epithelia are supplied by nerve fibers. So though they don't have capillaries, if you will, or some sort of blood supply, they do have nerve fibers. They do regenerate. They have a rapid turnover. They have to be replaced. And for this, they would have to get nutrients. Again, because they're avascular, they do it through diffusion. All right, let's talk about how to classify epithelial tissue. Number of cell layers and the shape of the cells. So it's very simple. If it's simple, it's so simple. If it's one, it's called simple epithelia. If it's two or more layers, it's called stratified. So we have the single layer here, so this is simple. We have the stratified because it's multiple layers. The basal surface is here, and that's the connective tissue underneath. So this is simple, and this is stratified. It's classified based on whether it's a squamous, cuboidal, or columnar cell, the shape of it. And the shape, these are just definitions. So flattened, kind of box-like for cuboidal, and columnar like a column. So this is probably some of the simpler vocabulary that we go through for descriptive names in our lecture here. What can happen? Each layer can have a different shape. So if you have a stratified cell, maybe it looks cuboidal at the basal surface, but it looks squamous at the apical surface. Then what we have is a stratified squamous epithelial tissue because it's named by the apical surface as shown here in bold. So what would this be? Oh, this is pseudostratified. Right, if you're in my lab, I did this very thing during our lab, but it's pseudostratified because it looks multiple layered, but it's actually not. The cells are just squished, so they look like there's like two layers here, two or more layers, but actually this one cell, it's going to be adhered down at the connective tissue. So this is a pseudostratified, just to throw in a little complication on how we name things. It's a fake stratified tissue. All right, so here you go. I have this slide highlighted, which means on your exam, the classifications of epithelial will come up, which is just so that you realize that you want to have an understanding of this.